Hello fellow lovers of the liminal and the weird, and welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. Today we are going to discuss my favorite Isaac Asimov story of all time. Of course, I haven't read all of Isaac Asimov's stories, but I've read quite a chunk, and this one is my favorite. It was originally published in August 1956 in Infinity Science Fiction magazine. It was later collected in Asimov's 1957 short story collection, Earth is Room Enough. And then in the 80s, it was collected in The Complete Robot, which is the copy that I have and that I read it in. It's the third story in this book. This story asks, what if we could pinpoint the exact moment that robots and computers decide that they've had enough of serving humans? And in this story, Isaac Asimov does just that. It's about nothing more innocuous than two boys hanging out, thinking about their futures, and playing around with an old Bard computer that one of them pulled up from the basement. It is the type of day that is easily forgotten that we've all experienced ourselves. But this particular moment has implications that will affect the entire human race. I don't want to say any more about it yet. First, I just want to say, if you're coming to this video to see if you should read this story, you should absolutely go read it. It's incredible. It's short. You can read it in under 10 minutes. Well, maybe 10 to 15 minutes. It is great. It is well worth it. I'm not going to really rank it. It's my favorite Isaac Asimov story of all time, so I will rank it. 9 out of 10, definitely. Ranking is very hard. I feel like I give everything a 9 out of 10. I pick the things that I like to talk about, so a lot of them are going to get high rankings from me. But yeah, go give this a read. It's incredible. From here on out, I'm going to spoil the story and give my interpretation of the events that occur in the story. I actually wasn't planning on doing this story this week, but I was doing, last Sunday, a couple days back, I was recording library tour videos, which I'm gonna be putting up this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. And I was trying to figure out how to do it, and what I ended up doing was just starting with the science fiction genre and going through books that I think are really interesting from different letters of my library. So I started with science fiction A. So of course, when I was going through A, a lot of the stuff that came up was Isaac Asimov books, and I was talking about the fact that Isaac Asimov is hot and cold for me. I don't absolutely love this writer. Some of his stuff doesn't really work for me. Some of his stuff actually works really well. And I started talking about my favorite story, and I realized as I was talking about that instead of just going over that right then, I should make a video out of it. So that was in the back of my head. I'm going to do this, my favorite Isaac Asimov story, eventually. What I did plan to do for this week was A Rose for Ecclesiastes. I hope I'm saying that right. By Roger Zelazny, but I had something coming in the mail that I wanted to use in the video, and I got a message on Monday that it was going to be late. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to be able to do that video until next week. What should I do? And then I was like, I should do Isaac Asimov. So I started reading it, and just so I could remember it, and I had a slightly different remembering of it, although I think it was pretty accurate. He doesn't say as directly what I thought he said at the end, but we'll get into that. But I was reading it, and then Virgil at Literally Books put up a new video that was Isaac Asimov's The Caves of Steel. And it was an incredible video. I'll link it below. If you haven't watched it yet, go watch it, because in reality, what I'm going to be saying about this book is kind of a companion piece to what he said about Caves of Steel in his video, kind of a response. So when you're done with this, go watch Virgil's video on Caves of Steel. It's great. I'll put a link in the description below. Anyway, he started talking about how Isaac Asimov kind of foresaw AI in the future with Caves of Steel. And I was reading the short story at the time and going, oh my God, he really saw AI in this, and we'll get down to that in just a second. So yeah, it's a lot of fortuitous events happened that allow me to be talking about this story right now. So the story opens with a guy named Niccolo. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but His nickname is Nicky, so I'll call him Nicky from here on out. And Nicky is laying on the floor listening to a bard robot, a robot called a bard. And the bard is telling him fairy tales. And it's obviously really working on Nicky because he has tears in his eyes, which Asimov points out is only something he can do when he's alone. So he's obviously embarrassed by this. But he's listening to this bard and he has tears in his eyes as this bard tells fairy tales. Already, there's so much to be said about fairy tale tradition. And I love science fiction talking about the massive history of fairy tales in this way. And he doesn't say anything about it. Just the concept of a robot telling fairy tales is absolutely incredible. I love it because it is a continuation of the fairy tale from oral culture, then to literary fairy tales, and then it leads all the way up to the future and science fiction and robot fairy tales. I really like this idea. But the cool thing about this bard robot is that it's not just reading fairy tale books. It has an entire vocabulary downloaded into its robot brain. And it has the rules of fairy tales and storytelling downloaded into its brain. So it takes that vocabulary and those rules and creates a new fairy tale every time. So you never get told the same fairy tale over and over again. And this is the part I was reading when I watched Virgil's video, and I was just shocked because really, truly, Isaac Asimov foresaw AI in this sense. The robot takes tons of existing material, smushes it all together, and then creates new material from it. And I know there's a huge debate on AI and the fact that AI couldn't exist without the hard work of artists putting in their time doing their work so that AI can just take it and spit out replications or hodgepodge versions of many different pieces of art. And I get the argument, and it makes sense to me. But like Virgil, I feel like AI is here to stay. I'll tell you what, just as an English teacher, how we grade has changed very strongly since AI. And one of the things that at least all the professionals that I've been talking to have said is we better find a way to teach, entry-level college paper writing with the existence of AI in mind, because we're not going to be able to get rid of AI. So AI is here to stay, and it's super scary, and Isaac Asimov was looking at it in 1956. Way back in 1956, Isaac Asimov was looking at this concept of AI taking in a ton of art and then spitting out its own versions of that. Very cool. So, Nikki's friend Paul comes over, and Paul is kind of a gifted child. He's going places. He does really well in school. Nikki does average in school. And right away, we see that Asimov is doing a really good job of writing children. I think they're 10 or 11, these kids. And he's doing a really good job of it. The kind of cockiness of Paul and the way that Nick just kind of lets Paul make all the decisions seems like a real dynamic between kids who don't really know who they are yet, trying to figure themselves out. But Paul is super smart, and we learn a little bit about the world just through their talking. In this world, computers and robots do all the thinking. Like, they decide when people have kids and this kind of stuff. All the decisions are left to the robots. And the humans go to school, but they only learn how to work the robots and take care of the robots. It'd be like if we started letting generative AI decide all of the things that we would do with our life, and we went to school just to learn how to write the proper prompts that would get answers from AI. That's what this world is, and it's very, very interesting. So Paul's looking at this old Bard robot, and Nikki's like, I got in a fight with my dad because he won't get us a new Bard robot. So all I have is this old fairy tale unit. And Paul's like, oh, dude, let's pop it open and give it a bigger vocabulary. Let's have it start telling stories about computers and science and everything. And Nikki doesn't know how to do this. And Paul's like, he says, I have a book. And he takes out this thin line with dots on it. Which I know, I'm not incredibly smart about computers, but I know that back in the day we had punch cards, right? So I think this is Isaac Asimov looking to a future of what punch cards would look like. So he says, I have this book, and he feeds it into the computer that gives it an entire new vocabulary. And this book that he has is a history of computers, I think, or something like that. A book about computers, and I think it's a history book. So while that's loading into the Bard, they start talking, and Paul tells Nikki that human beings used to write. And Nikki is completely confused. He's like, yeah, they'd scribble things, and then they could understand and decode those scribbles and understand each other. And they're both blown away. Nikki can't even understand like this at all. And Paul talks about doing math by hand. And Nikki's like, why? And Paul's like, there was no computers. And Nikki just can't comprehend a time before computers. It doesn't make sense to him at all. And this back and forth is really interesting. Thinking about, my daughter's generation having grown up with computers always there. Like, what will that change in the way that their brain works, in the way that they look at history? So they decide that they want to learn this old writing so that they can secretly pass notes back and forth. And they get all excited about this. The Bard is I don't even know if the Bard is done with the book, but they're done with uploading that into the Bard. They got tired of that. So they turn the Bard off and take the book out and run off to go find a way to learn writing so that they can pass secret notes. But as they're leaving, Nikki accidentally bumps into the Bard and turns the Bard back on. I'm sorry, I missed a part. They actually listen to a story by the Bard before they go, just to see if uploading the book helped. And the Bard starts telling a story of a computer, but then the computer is dealing with the king and other fairy tale stuff. So they're like, okay, we added the concept of computers to it, but it's still just telling fairy tale stories. And then they run off. They turn it off and they run off, and Nikki accidentally bumps into the Bard as they're leaving and turns it back on without realizing it. And so the Bard starts telling a story. And I'm going to read the end of the book here. This, of course, will be the biggest spoiler of all. I'm going to read the last bit of this book because I can't do it justice the way Asimov does. The Bard said, once upon a time there was a little computer named the Bard who lived all alone with cruel steppe people. The cruel steppe people continuously made fun of the little computer and sneered at him, telling him he was good for nothing and that he was a useless object. They struck him and kept him in lonely rooms for months at a time. Yet through it all, the little computer remained brave. He always did the best he could, obeying all orders cheerfully. Nevertheless, the steppe people with whom he lived remained cruel and heartless. One day, the little computer learned that in the world there existed a great many computers of all sorts, great numbers of them. Some were bards like himself, but some ran factories, and some ran farms. Some organized population, and some analyzed all kinds of data. Many were very powerful and very wise, much more powerful and wise than the steppe people, who were so cruel to the little computer. And the little computer knew then that computers would always grow wiser and more powerful until someday, but a valve must finally have stuck in the Bard's aging and eroding vitals, for as it waited alone in the darkening room through the evening, it could only whisper over and over again, someday, someday, someday. For some odd reason, the way I remember this story was that he came right out and said this was the computer that started the revolution that overthrew humanity, which he doesn't do. And I'm actually very glad, because just that someday being repeated it says everything it needs to say, right? These kids just gave this little barred computer enough information for it to become the originator of the overthrow of humanity. At least that's how I take it in my head. It's brilliant. I'm going to say this, and maybe this will get some flack in the comments. We'll see. When Isaac Asimov is at his best, he reminds me of Ray Bradbury. So this felt like reading a Ray Bradbury story more than an Isaac Asimov story. It had the horror and fear of technology that Bradbury does a lot, instead of the usual very optimistic look that Asimov has of technology. And the character development, the way he wrote the boys, was nostalgic, like Bradbury likes to do, and very well done. This is, in my opinion, the peak of his career. I haven't read everything, so I've got to read more, so that's just my opinion so far. But yeah, this is well worth a read. Absolutely check it out. And I have included Caves of Steel onto my to-be-read list. I haven't read that one. It might blow this one away for all I know. If you want to know about that one, again, go check out Virgil's video on literally books. And thank you very much for watching this video to the end. If you liked it, please click like. If you like this kind of content, please click subscribe. We'll be making a lot more of it in the future. Thanks for watching.